Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. How are you doing? I do hope you're doing great, and what an exciting story. We're on part 3 of the story tonight, and it's getting fascinating. We know that the two young teenagers, Tyler and his brother Adam, broke into Adam's grandfather's house. They were hoping to take some money out of the freezer that Adam happened to know was stored in a Tupperware container, and unfortunately they made a noise which caused Adam's grandfather to wake up. And what they discovered was that the poor man fell down the staircase in order to face the intruders that had obviously broken into his house, but he accidentally fell down the staircase and broke his neck. So Adam's grandfather is now dead, but Adam has discovered that his grandfather was suffering from very advanced pancreatic cancer and was intending to take his life the following week. So perhaps falling down the staircase wasn't such a terrible way out after all. Not that it makes it right, of course. So let's continue with our story, because we're about to find out, where does a Bigfoot come into the story? And let's continue with the story. "Go on," said Tyler the following evening, as the two teenagers sat with their backs supported by the stone slabs of two of the ancient gravestones in the sequestered graveyard behind the church at the dead of night, to reflect over the happenings of the previous evening. The sky was a velvety black colour, the moon hiding her bashful golden face behind some cloud cover. "You said you had something important to tell me, Adam. Please don't say that they are suspecting foul play in regards to your grandfather's death. It's all over the neighbourhood, you know. Everybody knows Malcolm is dead." Adam took a puff of his cigarette and sighed. "My God, I'm never going to forget last night. I don't want to do anything like that ever again. From now on, I'm going completely straight. Not that I was ever crooked in the very beginning. If it means working in a warehouse for the rest of my life, doing back-breaking work, I'll do it. I don't know why anyone would want to rob people for a living. Stealing seriously sucks, and turning to crime has got to be the worst, most stupid decision anybody could ever make for their life, because things will invariably always go wrong, like they did for us." "You're telling me," said Tyler. "I keep seeing your grandfather lying at the bottom of the stairs, with his neck broken at that odd angle. You don't forget something like that in a hurry. I haven't eaten a thing all day. I felt sick to the stomach. My mum keeps asking me what the hell is wrong with me, because I normally eat like a horse. I'm hardly going to tell her. Oh, by the way, Mum, I'm partly responsible for Malcolm Webber's fortuitous fall down his staircase. If she had any notion, Adam, what you and I got up to last night, it would break her heart. It would completely devastate her." "Me too. My mother would also feel much the same," Adam agreed. "I keep going over everything in my mind again and again. If that ice cream container hadn't fallen to the floor and slipped out of your hands and made that grievous sound, my grandfather would still be alive right now, even as I speak." "So go on," urged Tyler. "What was it you wanted to tell me, bro? You said it was important." "He had cancer. Pancreatic cancer." "What? Your grandfather actually had cancer?" "Bloody hell. Pancreatic cancer? And you didn't know?" "No. The parents kept it a secret from us. My grandfather didn't want anyone to know about his flailing condition. I guess he thought people would feel sorry for him, and he hated sympathy from people. I did notice when he was at the house last Friday night for dinner, he was really poorly, barely ate a single thing. Last night he was supposed to come to dinner with us, but he told my mother he had a headache. But come to think of it, she was being rather evasive about his condition, for obvious reasons. Maybe he was already getting terribly weak from the cancer that was ravaging his body. I wouldn't be at all surprised if that was the case. I know my mother dropped over a meal to him, and was actually surprised because he thanked her, and my grandfather has never thanked anyone a day in his life for anything. but I doubt he ate much of that meal. Cancer steals your appetite. So to cut a long story short, my grandfather was dying. He didn't have long left to live. That's why he was so incredibly frail. No wonder his neck snapped. It was probably so brittle," said Tyler, letting out a whistle. "I mean, if he'd been in better health, that may never have happened. Somehow I doubt it would have. There's more." "More? What do you mean more, Adam? Sometimes you really do talk in riddles, and it winds me up." "My grandfather was seeking euthanasia. An early way out. You see, he had 5 months left to live, and his doctor approved the prescription for, drugs that kill you. He was planning to kill himself, well, this coming week, actually." "You mean he wanted to kill himself? You're kidding me." "No, I'm not. I'm being deadly serious. He wanted to drink that deadly cocktail as soon as possible. So then, in an odd way, we did the old codger a favour. When we broke into the house, he went out like a light, didn't know a thing about it," said Tyler, a degree of relief washing over his face. "I mean, even the medication wouldn't have killed him that fast, and I guarantee he didn't suffer in that fall one little bit. I'm only telling you this, Tyler, to ease our guilt. At least it is moderately comforting to know he wanted to die before the cancer got way too advanced. But despite knowing this, I feel really, really bad about what happened, and I cannot get the tormenting imagery of him out of my mind. Lying dead at the bottom of that staircase. Oh, just thinking about it now grieves my heart. Me too. You don't think anyone suspects a thing, do you?" "They definitely don't suspect a thing. There was no sign of breaking or entering, was there? As far as everyone is concerned, my grandfather took a tumble down the staircase. It happens a lot, I believe, to elderly people. My mother spoke to the coroner. They're not treating his death as remotely suspicious. My mother believed he woke up remembering he'd left an open window in the kitchen because of the hot weather and forgot to close it, and he probably heard some raccoons in the bin. Well, that's what she thinks, and got a bit of a shake-up, so to speak, because he's terrified of anybody breaking into his house because of the money he keeps around the place. So that would explain the shotgun in his hands, is that what you're saying?" Adam shrugged. "Well, I just suspect that my mother emphatically believes that my grandfather was paranoid about any noises he might hear around the house. He was worried about being burgled because of the cash he kept around the property. So I suspect he went to bed with one eye open half the time. No wonder he got up the moment he heard that ice cream carton fall down onto the ground." "Fat lot of good his money's going to do for him now," said Tyler. "You can't take it with you, can you? What about your dad? Do you think he's sad that his father is dead? I mean, did he shed any tears about the matter?" "No, he's not sad. If the truth be told, he's probably very relieved. I don't think that my father liked his dad. One single bit. He never forgave him for the way he was treated during his childhood, and beaten by that belt of his. Can you believe it? The man is barely cold in his grave, and my parents are already squabbling about the funeral arrangements." "What do you mean by that?" "Well, my grandfather wanted to be buried at the local cemetery. He was planning to buy his own plot before he took the euthanasia route, and he was ordering his granite gravestone, well, thinking about it, so to speak. My mother wanted to honour his last wishes with a burial for him, but my dad is absolutely insisting on cremation. And as my grandfather didn't put his wishes in his will, it would seem my dad is going to get his way in the matter. Let's just say my dad always gets his way, Tyler. You and I well know that. It's his way or the highway. He's determined to get my grandfather cremated, and there's nothing my mother can do about it. I think my father likes having the last word, as if he's finally sticking up his finger to his father for the final time. Your dad really didn't like him. That's kind of sad, don't you think?" "Well, I can understand it to an extent. I mean, look at my own tumultuous relationship with him. It's hardly a bed of roses, is it? But even so, if my father wanted to be buried, I would honour his wishes for sure. even if they weren't stipulated in a will. All of a sudden, the two young teenagers heard the sound of a twig snapping that was coming from a tree only yards away from their two favourite gravestones. They glanced at each other through disquieted eyes. Someone was there. They absolutely knew, with a clear conviction, that somebody was there. Someone's boot had snapped a twig, and that person could be only feet away from them. And it did not sound like an animal that had made that noise. So had someone been eavesdropping in on their conversation, listening to every word they had said? Please God, no. Did they know that Malcolm Webber's death had been caused by them? Had someone in the neighbourhood inadvertently followed the teenagers to the graveyard? Maybe on the previous evening they had been spotted breaking into Malcolm Webber's house. And now this person, whoever they were, had clandestinely followed the two teenagers into the graveyard and were spying on them to witness their confessions to use against them about Malcolm Webber's demise. The thought was disconcerting to Adam. He began to tremble violently, throwing his cigarette onto the ground and stamping it out under the heel of his boot. "Someone's bloody there, bro," he whispered to Tyler in earnest. "And they're watching us." "Who's there?" Tyler called out. "We know you're there behind that tree. We heard you. Come out, will you?" The two teenagers could feel they were being watched, but whoever was hiding in their midst had not responded to their calls and was remaining perfectly still. But the two teenagers knew what they had heard. This person may be calling their bluff, but Tyler and Adam knew they were there and were not fooled for a single second. There it was again, the sound of a twig being snapped. A rustle of leaves and some of the foliage that curtained the tree appeared to be quaking a little. "Come out of there at once," called Tyler. "Quit playing these silly games with us. We know you are there. We can hear you. You've been spying on us." Tyler's voice trembled furiously as he called out towards the tree, shrouded by this dense thicket of burgeoning creepers that someone could easily be hiding behind. It was then that the two boys heard yet more snaps, more crackles and pops, as more branches appeared to be snapped, and something began to shake the tree, and then bolt hurriedly through the trees, with Adam and Tyler giving that person chase. It was of vital importance to find out who it was that had been eavesdropping in on their conversation, for this meddling, prying person, who had been willfully spying on them, could land the two teenagers into a whole heap of trouble, and at the very least they needed to know who they were up against. They observed a dark, ambiguous, obscure, shadowy figure charging through the trees, someone of a similar size and stature to themselves, dressed in black, wearing what seemed to be like a woolly hoodie over his head. Tyler was fast on his feet. He had always been a nimble athlete, coming first in sports that involved fast running, and in this vital second his fitness paid off in leaps and bounds, for he was gaining ground on the youth, who was pretty fast on his feet as well. Seconds later, Tyler had jumped the startled young man, throwing him violently onto the ground with a mighty thud, so that the youngster landed flat on his back. Tyler was expecting to pull back the hoodie from a face of a youngster that was dressed in a black woolly onesie, which was incongruously rather warm clothing for a summer's night like this that was rather hot. Tyler was expecting to see a bewildered face that stared up at him, one of the local youths in the neighbourhood perhaps. Adam finally caught up to Tyler, who was still pinning down the youth. "You got him, bro! Well done," he said breathlessly. "Who is it?" Tyler looked down at the teenager he was pinning to the ground, who appeared to be making a strange chattering sound, and it was then that both boys realized that Tyler was not holding down a youth at all, but a juvenile Bigfoot instead, who appeared to be struggling to escape his firm grasp. It was a velvety night. The soft moonlight spilled gently through the trees, illuminating the contour of the lanky Bigfoot's body rather generously, that was so much similar in shape and size to both of the teenagers, only covered in long flowing dark hair. The juvenile Bigfoot looked at them bemused, through rather frightened dark eyes, and both Tyler and Adam immediately stepped away, confounded by what they were seeing, allowing the juvenile Bigfoot to jump to his feet, which he did so instinctively. But at first he did not run away. Instead, for a brief second, 3 pairs of eyes were locked into a gaze. Adam and Tyler stared in confoundment at the creature, with wide, aghast eyes and jaws that were practically hanging on the ground. Adam remembered watching a program once on Bigfoots, and he'd never believed for a single moment that such idiosyncratic creatures existed in North America. The idea had seemed preposterously nonsensical to him. But Tyler had always believed in the cryptic creature. "Think about it, bro," he would say. "North America is a vast place, and here in Washington State there are many, many trees, and there have been sightings of these things by very credible witnesses, you know. Think about it. It's the ideal habitat for a creature to live in. You mark my words." "Don't be ridiculous," Adam had spouted. "There is no such thing, Tyler." But now as the 3 stared at each other, with nonplussed, rather startled looks, Tyler broke the silence with his words, almost as if he expected the young Bigfoot to comprehend exactly what he was saying. And to Adam's surprise, the Bigfoot did appear to be listening to him. His dark, intrigued eyes focused steadily on Tyler. The look of fear had abandoned his face, replaced by an inquisitive curiosity. "Sorry, I didn't mean to jump you like that. I thought you were someone else. Someone, well, you know, someone local to this area." What Tyler did next was so surprising. He pulled off the dog tags his dad had given him as a gift from around his neck and promptly handed it to the juvenile Bigfoot, who was very definitely male. The Bigfoot's brown eyes brightened. He chattered excitedly as he looked at the dog tag and put it over his neck, rubbing the tags with delight. "Kakakatolo, paki, tolo tanatali, ogo talasua." And looking from Adam to Tyler with such a thrilled gaze on his face. He then continued to chatter away so fast it was almost impossible to keep up with him, even if you understood what he was saying. But he did appear to be thanking them, and then he promptly glided away and was gone, giving them one last look with a glance over his shoulders. He seemed so delighted with the gift. "I don't believe it," said Adam. "Did that just happen? Or am I dreaming? Do I need to pinch myself, Tyler?" "No, it did happen." "I mean, Tyler, for how many years have we been coming to this graveyard? We would always tirelessly complain that nothing ever happens here. And then this happens tonight. Look at me. I've got goosebumps all over my arms. I'm actually trembling and shaking like a quaking aspen tree. A Bigfoot? Would you believe we'd encounter one of those?" "You're telling me," said Tyler. "Goodness gracious, Adam. Truly, I thought our lives were going to come tumbling down like a pile of cards. I imagined some sneaky lowlife was listening in on our conversation and was going to blackmail us or go to the police to report us for Malcolm's death, so that we'd be locked away for life. I thought it was over Godovers for us, bro. And all the time, it was a juvenile Bigfoot spying on us. And you were the one, Adam, that told me that these things did not exist." "I stand corrected, Tyler. But let me tell you this. I got the shock of my life to see you had pinned down a Bigfoot. In the distance, he looked like he was wearing a hoodie, didn't he? But when we got up close and personal, I realized he had a pyramid-shaped head. When you had him down on the ground like that, and I realized it was a Bigfoot you pinned down, I didn't know whether to be relieved or not. I mean, he was our size, wasn't he? How old do you suspect he was?" "No idea, bro. But he's certainly young." "I couldn't believe you actually spoke to him, Tyler, as if you expected him to understand you." "But it felt like he did," said Tyler. "He's definitely very intelligent. I felt so bad for holding him down like that." "What made you give him your tags? You love those tags your dad gave you." "I needed to give him something special, especially after jumping him like that. and the only thing I had on my person were my dog tags. It seemed like the right thing to do at the time. And besides, I can always replace them. He was thrilled, bro. I mean, really thrilled. It was like you had given him a lottery jackpot. I wish when I gave a present to someone, they'd be that happy. When I give people presents at Christmas, they open them up and practically sigh, almost as if my present is so predictably dull. My father looks at his present and says, "Ah, it's socks again, isn't it, Adam? Very predictable." One year he didn't even bother to open up my present, which really hurt, until he couldn't find any socks in his closet, because I had brought him really trendy socks, which I thought was a pretty decent gift. As for Blaine, she's not grateful for anything I buy her. When I give her a present at Christmas, it's a watery smile I receive, and a rather stilted thanks from her. I usually find out later that she's taken the thing back to the store to change for something she prefers. But that Bigfoot's reaction to your tags, well, that made me smile. He was genuinely happy. Do you think he was spying on us? He must have been, said Tyler. I expect Bigfoots are interested in us, like we are in them. Do you think he spied on us before, when we'd been at the cemetery? I mean, it's a possibility, is it not? That's a very good question, Adam, and I don't know the answer to it. I mean, that Bigfoot would not have given himself away to us if the two of us were not so spooked after what happened to your grandfather. I think our senses were on high alert, very acute and sharp tonight. And let's not kid, I freaked out when I heard that twig snap. My heart practically galloped out of my chest, I was so afraid. Me too, said Adam. Actually, I think I went completely numb. After my grandfather's fortuitous accident last night, I've been going around in such a dithery daze. Anyway, at least we know that no one in the neighborhood knows our secret, and we need to keep it that way, apart from that Bigfoot, and he's unlikely to blab on us. Actually, I thought he was quite sweet, didn't you? He had such nice, deep, dark eyes. A sense of humour for sure. It seems Bigfoots, they do get a bad rap from people. It's almost like people want to say they're all dreadful creatures, all dangerous and frightening. But I didn't think he had a bad bone in his body. In the beginning, I think he was actually more afraid of us than the other way round, until he realised we meant him no harm. If the juvenile is like that, I suspect his parents are benevolent as well. It's been quite the night, hasn't it, Adam? I'm finding all this hard to process. Well, at least the events of the last couple of evenings. All this adrenaline, I can't cope with it. It's wearing me down. I'm absolutely exhausted. I think I need to make tracks home. Oh, by the way, I meant to ask you, when is the funeral for your grandfather? I suppose I should come with you in the circumstances, given I had something to do with his unfortunate passing. I can always make out that I'm there to support you. How many times do I have to tell you, Tyler? There isn't going to be a memorial service. I thought I made myself clear on that. My father does not want to honour his late father's wishes by allowing him to be buried at that cemetery. My grandfather is being cremated. His urn will be delivered in the post. My mother's, of course, very upset about this whole wretched business, but what can she do about it? Absolutely nothing. She thinks my father is being incredibly unkind, but my dad says the miserable old sod doesn't deserve any kind of memorial. You're joking, said Tyler, looking aghast. Not even a service? Nothing, said Adam, shaking his head. People have been phoning to ask about where the service is going to be held for my grandfather. But Dad's telling everybody it's a strictly private family event, and that's that. Goodness gracious me, Adam. That is terrible. I don't know what to say. Honestly, that is a cruel thing to do. I mean, your grandfather, no, he wasn't a particularly nice man. He was rather miserable. I've met him myself over the years, and always walked to the other side of the road when I saw him coming. But nobody deserves this. Your father must have really hated him. I think so. Let's just say, Tyler, this has been eye-opening for me, let me tell you. I knew my father had no time for his dad, but I never knew he would be so vengeful and vindictive like this. I mean, it's awful to see. And my mother's terribly upset about the whole wretched business. I mean, my grandfather wanted to be buried at that cemetery, to have a tombstone erected with his name on it. He even made arrangements for a plot and a stone before he actually died. So my father and some of his friends could actually come and visit him at the graveyard, lay down flowers for him. Dad says it's not happening. He didn't put the request in the will, so it's not happening. My father's getting him cremated. I know it's a horrible thing to do, but that is what is going to happen. It seems he's very pleased with himself, almost as if he's got the last laugh, if you know what I mean. Well, I suppose you can at least bury the ashes at the graveyard, in the urn. People do that, you know, a lot. You can even erect a plaque. It's not too late for any of that. My father says when he receives the ashes, he's going to scatter them himself. Find a nice spot to say his farewells to his father. God forbid what he's going to say. I can only imagine it. He's probably going to say, "I'm glad you've gone," or something like that. Well, that's pretty bleak, isn't it? Said Tyler. I almost feel sorry for your grandfather. He doesn't deserve this. No, he doesn't. Nor did he deserve to die the way he did he, Tyler? But at least we know now that he was in fact dying, and he was seeking the euthanasia route. He was deadly serious about that, which gives us some comfort. I just wish to God we could go back in time and undo what we did. I mean, if we hadn't climbed through that window, none of this would have happened in the first place. I wish I hadn't agreed to do any of this. Well, we can't go back in time, can we, Adam? What's done is done. Tyler slapped Adam on the back. I'm really sorry, bro. This is all my fault. I shouldn't have encouraged you to do this. Let's not go there, bro. This is not your fault. I could have put my foot down, couldn't I? But I didn't. It takes two to tango, as they say. My mother said this was the week my grandfather was going to drink that lethal cocktail, after he'd sorted out the gravesite for himself. So he just died a few days earlier, that's all. I have to say that does not make me feel any better, said Tyler. I mean, think about it, bro. He'd have got his wish about where he wanted to be buried, if he hadn't died prematurely. And this is all our fault. I feel much the same, bro. But there's nothing we can do about this. 2 weeks later, Adam was sitting very comfortably at his walnut desk in his bedroom, writing down some notes for a project he was doing. That was when he heard the sound of the van rattling up the driveway and the squeaking sound of the brakes. He glanced briefly out of the window. That was when he observed the postman climbing out of his van, carrying a box in his hand. He was clearly delivering a parcel. As usual, Percy, loved by all the locals, due to his bright sunny smile, was whistling merrily to himself as he sashayed rather eagerly towards the Webbers' front door and began to knock. Adam had never known Percy Goddard to not have a smile on his face. He was one of those people you could not help but like. He had a kind heart. Adam knew his father was at home. He could hear his father's footsteps trailing all the way to the front door, and the sound of a chain being pulled back, and the door finally opened. "Good morning, Mr. Webber," came Percy's cheerful voice. "And how are you today?" "Good, thank you, Percy. How about you? How are you doing? And more to the point, how is your wife doing?" "Oh, you know, I'm always great. Couldn't be better, actually. Nothing ever gets me down. Not even the weather, you know. It's the wife. Well, she's been better. She's having what I can only describe as a bad hair day today, I'm afraid. She got one of those annoying, irksome migraine headaches. They rarely get her down. We still don't know what brings them on. There's nothing she can do about it. Tried absolutely everything. Seen doctors and specialists. She tends to just sleep for 3 days in a row, in a dark room. That's all she can really do, until the headache abates. She can't bear any lights, and our whole house has to be decorated in dark greens, greys, and whites. God forbid if it's anything else. Any other colour, she'll be violently sick. Especially yellows, reds and pinks. They're the very worst. She can wear them, but she can't use them in her decor. They'll make her seriously ill. I wish I could do something for her. It's so miserable to see her like this. I feel so helpless being unable to help her. But we just have to grin and bear it, as you do. I'm very sorry to hear that, Percy. That's not good news. I mean, you've mentioned to me before her migraine headaches, but I had no idea they were this bad. Do send her our regards and best wishes for a swift recovery, will you? Will do so. Appreciate that, Mr. Webber, very much. I don't talk about her condition. The wife's sensitive about the subject when I tell people about her health. But these migraines, they're brutal. And I figured if I tell enough people about her issue, someone might know something that could possibly help her. So tell me, Mr. Webber, how's the family? Oh, Sylvette is fine. Adam and Blaine are doing great, thank you very much. Glad to hear it, Mr. Webber, said Percy, nodding. You've got good kids, you know, Mr. Webber. I'm sorry about your father's fortuitous death. That must have come as quite the shock for you. Everybody in the local community is talking about it. I heard about his nasty, unfortunate fall down the staircase. It's all over town. What a way to go, said Percy, shaking his head sorrowfully. Staircases, hey? They're notorious for causing fatal accidents. That's why older people should live in bungalows. That's what I say. Or avoid using the upstairs rooms. Unless, of course, they have a lift fitted. I mean, your dad was getting on in age, wasn't he? How old was he? 91. The postman whistled. 91? You're kidding. He looked to be in his early 80s. I suppose people are living longer these days. And your father was still mobile. No, he was definitely 91. Percy nodded. Well, someone was saying he had pancreatic cancer. Is that true, or is that just a wild rumour? Only I noticed of late he looked rather peaky when I saw him last. Goodness gracious me, Percy. Word really does get out in our small town, does it not? It's true, I'm afraid. He did only have 5 months left to live. He was considering euthanasia. He had already organised the meds. He was planning to take them this very week. Bloody hell! He's a brave man. I'm not sure I could do that myself, even if given the opportunity, even if I had cancer. Mind you, the wife with her migraine attacks would consider it during one of them. Let me tell you, the pain is that bad. Well, it's not for everyone, is it? No, it's not, Mr. Webber, it is not. But I applaud the man for doing what felt right for him. I mean, who are we to judge how a person chooses to end their own lives? I mean, when it comes to animals, we refuse to let them suffer, don't we? And yet humans are not always given the same rights, even when they want them. You're right about that. He would have had to go to Switzerland if the Death with Dignity Act hadn't been passed in 2009. My wife thinks falling down the staircase was actually almost a gift. He wouldn't have known a thing. His ending would have been swift and quick. You know, Mr. Webber, I agree with your wife on that one. I'd think he never felt a thing, and that's got to be better than ingesting a lethal cocktail that tastes as bitter as gall. If given the choice, that's the way I would prefer to go. Oh, before I forget, Mr. Webber, while we're on the unfortunate subject of your father's early demise, I've got the parcel you're waiting for, said the postman, lowering his voice and handing the package to Adam's father. It's hard to believe that that is all that's left of the poor man. As I was saying, Mr. Webber, you have my deepest sympathies. The wife asked me to send you her condolences as well. She was grievously shocked to learn of his sudden fortuitous death. We all were. But it's the people that are left behind that suffer the most, you know. I lost my father a long time ago, and his death broke me, let me tell you. I never saw it coming, and that was almost worse. But it was terrible losing a father. Adam's father looked down at the parcel and nodded. Thanks for your kindness, Percy. It's very appreciated. Well, you know the saying, Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It's what happens to us all in the end. I'll let you into a little secret, Mr. Webber. I enjoy making the deliveries all the time. But let's not kid. Delivering ashes to folk from the crematorium is one of my least favourite things to do. But it has to be done. And as my boss always reminds me, someone has to do it. It can't be easy for you, Percy. No, it's not. I've had people in floods of tears at the doorstep. I've had to take people into their own houses and make them tea with lots of sugar. I understand you're not having a memorial service for your father. Is that right? That's right. We're keeping it strictly family. Well, I suppose that's understandable. Some people like to keep the funeral private, but a lot of people around here will be disappointed about that. I think they would have liked to have said their final farewells to the old fellow. I hope you don't think I'm an interfering busybody, Mr. Webber. But do you have in mind what you're going to do with your father's ashes? I'm only asking this question in case you don't know where to scatter them. You see, I may have some ideas for you. Or, of course, you can tell me it's none of my business. Go on, I'm listening, Percy. Well, I got to know your father rather well over the years, Mr. Webber. I've been delivering post to him for quite a while now. In my line of work, you develop a good relationship with people, like I have with you and your children. So I know most of the people around these parts very well indeed. Me and your father would talk quite regularly. He always tried to bribe me to play board games with him. There were times I would agree, and times I would not. Board games really are not my kind of thing, Mr. Webber. But I never told him that, of course, your father, I mean. I happen to know your father loved that creek in the woods. He always talked about it to me incessantly. He told me he loved sitting there watching the water. When his old dog, that Labrador mix of his, Benny, was alive, your father would throw sticks for him into the water, and he'd run after them and bring them back to your father. When that old dog died, well, it was never the same for your dad. He went significantly downhill when he lost his friend. Those two were joined at the hip, you know. I know, said Mr. Webber. It's true everybody loved good old Benny. My wife got him from the shelter for my father, and at first he didn't want anything to do with the dog, and my wife told him to keep it for a night or so, and if he still couldn't bear the dog a moment longer, we would keep it instead. Naturally, Blaine and Adam were really hoping with all their hearts that their grandfather would not want the dog. But he did, although of course he never admitted it. But we could tell he was smitten by the thing. There was such a contented twinkle in his eyes, and he said he'd keep it a bit longer, but we knew he was keeping it forever. Anyway, I know he fed that dog fillet steak, roasted chicken, the best food money can possibly buy. And my father was by nature a stingy bugger. But that dog, he was treated like a king. It's true, your father would do anything for Benny. On the week Benny died, I do remember your father did not leave his house. He was stricken with grief, you know. Anyway, getting back to my point, Mr. Webber, it's really weird, because your father said to me very recently that when he died he was going to be buried at the local cemetery, and was intending to buy a plot of land for himself. He seemed to have it all figured out. So I was rather taken aback that he'd got cremated in the end. I suspect he changed his mind at the last minute, which people often do before they die. Anyway, one day he just said off the cuff to me that if he were to be cremated, which he didn't want, that he'd want his ashes sprinkled over the creek in the woods, so that he could be with his dog Benny. I believe he sprinkled Benny's remains over the creek. It's so pretty there, I have to say. Isn't it rather cryptic that he should mention all this stuff off the cuff to me like that? Oh, it certainly is, Percy. Well, I know for years every morning, Mr. Webber, your father walked that woodland trail. Until Benny died, of course. And then shortly afterwards, your father, well, he got a lot less agile, a lot less fit. My wife was telling me to mind my own business. She thinks I interfere too much in other people's affairs. Of course, she's probably right about that. But I thought you would like to know, Mr. Webber, what your father happened to say to me, unless of course you have in mind to keep his ashes with you permanently, and that is perfectly fine. I know, for example, Mr. Darrington, the old man who lives at number 43. He's also getting on in his age. I think he's in his 90s now, much like your father was. But with him you can see it. Let's just say when his wife died, he kept her ashes on the mantel, in a beautiful ornate-looking urn. It's still there to this very day, even as I speak. He tells me he likes her to be with him in the house. The ashes bring him great comfort. I say each to his own, Mr. Webber. My wife would kill me if I left her ashes on the mantel in our home, said Percy, letting out a chuckle. She'd come back from the grave, you know, to haunt me, until I scattered her remains somewhere pretty. I'll bear everything you've told me in mind, Percy. Thank you for telling me all about the creek. This is news to me. It's nice to know these things, isn't it? I hoped you would say that, Mr. Webber. It's uncanny to think I was playing Monopoly with your father 4 weeks ago. Now he's gone. Never once did he ever mention to me he had cancer. But he was wheezing a lot when I saw him, and he had lost a hell of a lot of weight in a short space of time. And that's never a good sign, is it? I said to the wife that Malcolm was looking rather frail and gaunt, a tad unwell, and now this. You played Monopoly with my father, did you, Percy? You have my deepest sympathies, said Mr. Webber, letting out a muted chuckle. You're telling me, Mr. Webber. He told me to get ice cream from the freezer in the middle of our game, and when I returned, with 2 bowls in my hand, he had mysteriously acquired several new hotels on some of his properties. Never again, Mr. Webber, let me tell you. Your father was quite the cheat. I didn't have a hope in hell in winning against him. Not a chance. Not when you play like that. The 2 men laughed between each other. Why do you think I refused to play with him myself, Percy? The man was incorrigible. Anyway, Mr. Webber, have a very good day. And as I was saying, my commiserations about your father. I'm very, very sorry for your loss. Adam watched the kindly postman climb back into his postal van and drive away. As he did so, he lifted up a hand in farewell, and his father returned the favour. Adam's father stood in the front yard, staring disdainfully at the box containing the urn of ashes, as if it was the most disgusting thing he'd ever beheld. His father opened the box rather cautiously, pulling out the urn, which he slowly inspected in his hands. It looked rather on the cheap side, almost as if Adam's father had bought the cheapest urn he could possibly find at the funeral home. His father took out the urn and inspected it, letting out a mock laugh. You miserable old sod, he said so loudly that Adam could hear his every word. I'm glad you're not breathing down my neck any more. You've just been reduced to a pile of dust now, he said, shaking the urn. Percy wanted me to springle you by the creek, did you hear that? That place is far too good for the likes of you. I know where you're going, and it's right where you belong, with the garbage, in a nice landfill site. How does that sound to you, Dad? No, there's no nice little plot waiting for you in a cemetery. No, there's no granite gravestone with your name on it. No, that's all too good for you, Dad. Sorry, no can do. Adam watched in horror as his father marched over to the dumpster and threw the urn and the cardboard box straight inside the bin, slamming the lid shut with an indignant grunt. He then marched straight back to the house with a satisfied smirk on his face, muttering something nasty under his breath. It was in that moment that Adam realized how much his father absolutely loathed his own father. I mean, no one would throw someone's ashes in a dumpster as if their entire life had meant absolutely nothing. The right thing to do would be to scatter the ashes in a beautiful place and to bid the man farewell. But his own father had deprived his father of that. Adam knew instinctively what needed to be done. He would surreptitiously retrieve the urn from the dumpster when his father was not looking, buy some flowers and scatter them with his friend Tyler at the creek in the woodgrove, first thing the following morning. It would be the decent, right thing to do. No one deserved to be discarded and disposed of in such an unseemly, almost unholy way. Adam could not help his grandfather escape falling down the staircase, or from being cremated instead of buried. But the one thing he could do was prevent his grandfather from having his ashes buried in a landfill site. Adam waited cautiously for the ideal moment, and when he heard his father noisily clattering away in the kitchen, probably making himself a sandwich for lunch, he clandestinely slipped over to the dustbin, and there under the banana peelings and all kinds of congealed mucky goo, he found the forsaken urn. Luckily it had not been broken, so he dragged it out of the dumpster. It was covered with slimy muck, so Adam discreetly walked over to the yard tap and washed the filth away from the urn under jets of ice-cold water. All the time he looked apprehensively over his shoulders to check that his father did not come out of the house. And then furtively he slipped the urn under his sweater, so he looked as if he had a distended stomach, and hurriedly sidled up the staircase, with his father almost catching him in the act, but luckily his back was facing away from him. "Oh, there you are, Adam. I wondered where you'd got to. I need you to lend me a hand for a moment with the washing machine. Your mum's only blocked it again with one of her hairpins." "I'll be down in a second," said Adam. "I just need to take a leak." He bolted through the door in his room and hid his grandfather's urn very discreetly under his bed, covering it with an old towel and hiding it in an obscure place so that it could not be seen. So there we are. That's the end of part 3. Part 4 is tomorrow night. I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.